United States on Sunday, this is according to Time magazine, on Sunday, the United States was added to the Human Rights Watchlist. We're right up there with Republic of Congo and Pakistan and Serbia. The United States on the Human Rights Watchlist. This is according to the CIVICUS, never heard of them, but CIVICUS Monitor Watchlist. That's a research tool that takes a look at and publicizes the status of freedoms and threats to civil liberties in countries around the planet. And all of a sudden, there we are, thanks to the orange fuck Donald Trump. Now, according to Civicus, this comes because of the orange bastard's, quote, assault on democratic norms and global cooperation, end quote. Now, Civicus, just to be clear, is a global alliance. This is how it's defined. It defines itself a global alliance and network of civil society groups, including Amnesty International, that advocates for greater citizen action in areas where civil liberties are limited. And we're on the list now. The organization, Civicus, also cited the orange bastard's cut of more than 90% of its foreign aid contracts and its crackdown on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which the orange bastard called illegal and immoral discrimination programs. Jesus fucking Christ. I guess somebody, not Trump, Trump is an illiterate fucking savage, but somebody, a group of somebodies, really studied Orwell's novel 1984 as a training manual rather than as a warning, and have filled this orange ape's head with all this crazy shit so that Trump can say, well, diversity, equity, inclusion are illegal and immoral discrimination programs. What kind of a sociopathic idiot is required if someone is going to spout that kind of shit? Well, Donald Trump is. There he is. The interim co-secretary general of Civicus said in a press release, quote, the Trump administration seems hell-bent on dismantling the system of checks and balances which are the pillars of a democratic society. Restrictive executive orders which have poured out of the orange bastard's pen since he became president. Those orders, coupled with unjustifiable institutional cutbacks and intimidation tactics through threatening pronouncements by officials in the Trump administration, are creating an atmosphere to chill democratic dissent, a cherished American ideal, end quote. So we're right there now with the Democratic Republic of Congo, Pakistan, Serbia, Russia, China, yes, indeedy. What else does it say here? Civicus also issued a statement, quote, we urge the United States to uphold the rule of law and respect constitutional and international human rights norms. Americans across the political spectrum are appalled by the undemocratic actions of the current administration, end quote. Boy, oh boy, oh boy. And it's not just the American government. It is also certain noticeable American corporate entities in this country, like, let me think of one. I know, Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, who recently notified the staff of the editorial pages, not the news pages. The news and editorial are usually separate. That's the whole idea, to keep editorial content, which is supposed to reflect the opinion, or opinions, plural, of editorial writers who are either on staff or who are invited to guest editorial something for for a newspaper. The news department is supposed to abide by the rules of journalism, which means if you see somebody killing somebody else, you don't say, look, somebody's killing somebody else. What you're supposed to say is, a man was killed today. There's a big difference, isn't there? Because if you say, look, somebody's killing somebody, that's an assumption of guilt. That's taking a position. That's taking a side. And the strict rules of journalism say, no, you don't do that. You report. It's kind of a Buddhist principle. You look, observe, note, and let it go. So the editorial pages of a newspaper or a magazine or even websites, news websites, like the Times, the Post, whatever, those editorial pages are supposed to be free of the usual strictures required in journalistic reporting. They are opinion pages. Opinion. This is my opinion. And then the public that reads that are invited or is invited to respond any way the public wants to. Support it, contradict it, challenge it, whatever. But Jeff Bezos recently said that from henceforth and here on, as Bezos continues to display that he is a complete fucking suck-up to Donald Trump, another American neo-Nazi, there he is, Jeff Bezos, Amazon, right? Bezos ordered the editorial page, henceforth and here on, to only have articles that talk about, talk about stuff, personal liberties, and the free market, which is not free. We all know that. But no more political points of view, especially if you're going to come from the left. Well, one of the first casualties, along with hundreds of thousands, I understand, subscribers, but several people decided to resign. And the most recent is one of my favorite editorial writers, Ruth Marcus. She has worked at the Washington Post for 40 years. She resigned yesterday after she said that the newspaper's management decided not to run her opinion commentary critical of the new editorial policy of the paper. Now, if you are an unthinking Christian who is told, do what we tell you or you'll burn in hell, you might find that Ruth Marcus's decision to bail out was, she had it coming. Well, if you're not going to do what the boss says, get the fuck out. That is the wrong attitude, but that's an attitude that seems to be everywhere you look. If you're not going to do what the boss says, get the fuck out. Well, there is a difference in doing what the boss says if you work in an auto plant or you're an opinion writer for the Washington Post. There's a difference. Anyway, Marcus, who has been at the Washington Post since 1984, wrote a resignation letter that included the line, quote, "It breaks my heart to conclude that I must leave," end quote. Now, that's the latest fallout from the billionaire Jeff Bezos, who owns the Post, his directive that the Post narrow the topics covered on the opinion pages to, quote, personal liberties and the free market. Now, the opinion's editor, David Shipley, had already resigned because of that shift. And Shipley was one of the most qualified editorial page editors in the United States. You see what's going on. You see what's going on. That's why little old independent podcasts like this one are becoming more and more important. And I'm not saying it's not from a personality standpoint. There are bunches of us who are struggling to keep going, to keep alive the idea that fuck you. You're not going to tell me what to say when I challenge your policies, especially when I see all the evidence that they are fascistic. Not to sound like a knight in shining armor, because I'm not. Nobody who works from the left is. What we are trying to do is what you do when you support us, what you do when you vote a certain way, and that is trying to support the ideals laid out in the Constitution. The Post has been in a free fall financially and editorially over this past year, especially because of Bezos' refusal to endorse, to endorse Kamala Harris for the presidency. When Bezos took the chicken shit way out and said, "Well, we're not going to endorse either one." Oh, fuck you, Bezos. Right. And by doing that, you were endorsing Trump. You knew it, and everybody knew it. But anyway, the editorial department, Ruth Marcus, who worked in both the news and opinion departments during her career, not at the same time, but she is, quote, according to a former media reporter at the Post, Ruth Marcus was, quote, the bedrock of the Washington Post, embodying the history of the place as well as the talent and accomplishment of its journalists, end quote. Now, Ruth Marcus said that the Post's publisher, Will Lewis, declined to run her column, which Ruth described as, quote, respectfully dissenting from Jeff Bezos' directive. And it was the first time in nearly 20 years of writing columns that she had one killed, she said. And she wrote that the decision by the publisher, quote, underscores that the traditional freedom of columnists to select the topics they wish to address and say what they think has been now dangerously eroded, end quote. Her resignation letter was not surprisingly first reported by the New York Times. And a spokesperson for the Washington Post said yesterday, and this is a typical corporate horse shit that you usually hear, this is what the official statement from the Post was, quote, we're grateful for Ruth's significant contributions to the Washington Post over the past 40 years. We respect her decision to leave and wish her the best, end quote. Well, now, yes, Jeff Bezos and Will Lewis, the publishers, they have the right to make a decision restricting what their opinion writers say. Ultimately, they are, after all, the bosses, right? But according to the journalist who commented on this, I just quoted him a minute ago, that journalist said that has not been the tradition, that the publisher or the editor would slap somebody down because they were mildly critical of a decision made on the management level. And this person, he is a, what's his name? Fari, I think. He's the, Paul Fari, who is a former media reporter. But Mr. Fari said that he compared what this decision and then Ruth's resignation to how the Justice Department, so-called, while technically under White House control, has generally operated independently, especially before this Trump fucker took office and hired this crazy blonde bitch Pam Bondi. But editorial writers and columnists who are paid to give their opinions, usually they decide what to write. Now, I've had this experience. I was an editorial writer for 2 different weekly publications here in Metro Atlanta over the past 50 years. And while I had I can remember a couple of occasions, just little old me in little old Atlanta for a little old weekly alternative newspaper, I can remember sitting down having to sell the point of view I was trying to get out in my column for that particular week. So it's not unusual when an editorial writer, or an opinion writer, I should say, is challenged by the publisher, by the owner. And I remember when I was managing editor of one of the weekly papers here and had a couple of opinion pieces written, and the publisher told me that she was not going to allow those opinion pieces to go in the paper. And I said, well, if you don't allow them, then I quit. And she said, you can't quit, you're fired. One of those little scenes. And that ended that little bump in my career. But it's not unusual. The danger is that a decision by a publisher not to allow a column to go forward can cause the people who are reading that publication to question whether the viewpoints of writers are truly their own. I mean, if Ruth Marcus writes something and I read it, and all of a sudden it does not ring true as to what Ruth Marcus has been saying in the 30 years that I've been following her column, well, yeah, I'm going to question, what is this all about? And then to find out that it's because Ruth Marcus's column was censored or changed or edited. But that doesn't happen, you see. I'm giving you a hypothetical there. That doesn't happen. When someone like Ruth Marcus writes an opinion piece, it goes in the way she wrote it, because that's what they hire her to do. So if Ruth Marcus is censored and told, no, you're not going to run that, then because she's a journalist, because she respects the First Amendment, because she's an American, because she believes in the freedom of speech, she has one choice: resign, which is what she did. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. The Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.